What's going on? It is Jeremy Daly again, CEO and co-founder here at Ampt, with another live stream. Hopefully the audio is a little bit better today. It was a little loud last week. It was too soft before. No, it's too loud, or it was too loud last week. So hopefully this is a little bit better. Anyways, we're live on YouTube and on Twitch and on LinkedIn and on, what did I miss? Twitter? Did I say Twitter? I don't know. We're live on all the channels. So anyways, just quickly, if you don't know what Ampt is, essentially Ampt is a service that allows you to just write your application code. And really the cool piece of Ampt is sort of this idea of a self-provisioning runtime. And what that is that within an AWS account, we install an Ampt environment. And that Ampt environment can then take in your application code, and from that code, using what we call runtime introspection, figure out exactly what resources you need, how to configure it. And then also, with our service running, we can actually optimize it over time. So shift you between Lambda functions and containers. Make changes to memory, things like that. So we can do some pretty cool things to optimize the application for you. And essentially, all you have to do is write application code. So it's pretty cool. Come check it out on the website here somewhere. There is a demo video, probably somewhere on here. Here's that shows you sort of the walkthrough, how it works, and things like that. And then a little bit more detail. I think here that it will give you how the actual service itself works and coordinates all these things for you. Anyways, today I want to talk about SQL, or SQL Postgres to be specific. There has been a lot of talk about sort of serverless SQL providers. There's PlanetScale that does MySQL. There's Postgres from Zeta and from Neon. There's some other ones that are doing some interesting types of data like that. Obviously, you could use just an RDS cluster that you set up in AWS. You've got serverless Aurora or Aurora serverless. There's V1, there's V2. The differences between those, they're interesting. One's more serverless maybe than the other one is, but the other one scales better than the other one does. So there's just a lot of choices out there. But I think that as a developer, one of the things that you want to be able to do is, if you are very familiar with sort of that relational database type syntax, and you're used to working with Postgres or with MySQL or MySQL, whatever you call it, or maybe Oracle or Microsoft SQL Server, maybe. That's something that a lot of developers, I think, are comfortable with. They've built a lot of applications using that versus using something like Mongo or DynamoDB or some of these other things. So I've been involved in been using DynamoDB for, I don't know, 10 years now, something like that. So I love Dynamo. I can build a lot of the applications that I need to build in Dynamo. I like the simplicity of it. I like the fact that we always get, sort of consistent. There's no query optimizer in DynamoDB. You don't have to worry about, huge joins and things like that. But it is a different, different style of building data-driven applications. And of course, you can mix in, sort of the NoSQL with the relational to do different things. But anyways, all right, SQL or RDBMS, right? So this is something that a lot of developers still love, and you still need it for a lot of sort of analytical queries and things like that. And it is also really nice because it's flexible and easy to get started. So, all right, I rambled for too long. Let's jump right into it. So in Ampt, we have a module that we call SQL. So this is the Ampt SQL module, and essentially what this is an interface into Neon. So neon.tech, we'll go over there for a second. Neon.tech is a serverless Postgres, fully managed serverless Postgres with a generous free tier where we separate storage and compute to offer auto-scaling, branching, and bottomless storage. So you can use this on its own. You could go in here and sign up for an account and create your own account in there and create your own branches, and all the stuff that you can do with this is a very, 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 very good program, or very, very good service that does some pretty cool things. You can see obviously they've got quite a few developers and partners that are using it. Ampt is one of the partners that is using Neon as well. But so you can do this manually, and maybe I might be able to log in here. Let's see if I log in with my Yeah, so I don't have any projects set up under this particular account here, but essentially this is what you would do. You could come in, you can create a new project, and you might call this, I don't know, we'll call this my blog, and we'll name the database. Let's call it my blog. I guess that's maybe redundant. You can select the region that you want to put it into. So let's do this one, and we'll hit create project. And then essentially what this does is this gives me this connection here that I can use in order to connect to it from my from whatever service I want to use, any sort of Postgres client that I want to use to actually connect with that. I'm not going to worry about this now because this is one of the things that we tried to do with Ampt to just make this more friendly for the developer. So essentially what we have is when you install the Ampt SQL module into one of your applications, we automatically create a Postgres SQL database using Neon for you and automatically do the connection management for it. Pardon my voice. I was at the Red Sox game last night, yelling a little bit loud. Had a great event over there with Pluralsight and the Boston Business Journal. So, talking about developer experience in the cloud. Who would have guessed it? So, anyway, so the idea here is that you install this and it automatically negotiates those connections for you. It automatically creates the passwords and so forth. And then when you create preview branches or when you create permanent stages like a prod or maybe a staging or a test or dev, where that's a sort of a shared permanent stage, it'll automatically create those for you as well. Now, we've done some interesting things trying to play around with branching and some of these other things so that you could split your data. And if you were using like a preview environment versus a regular environment, that some of that stuff would sort of be split for you. It's a little challenging to do some of that, but we continue to work on it. Again, we have the beta tag slapped on here because this is still beta. So the idea here is not so much that you don't want to use it in production. I mean, we did say that it's currently in beta, don't use it in production. But really, the idea is if you have a production use case and you're interested in using this, we really, really want to talk to you and figure out exactly what else you need, what other controls you need, and so forth. Because we get that you might want to have a little bit more control over the database itself. So, anyways, let's just jump into it. We'll jump into a project. We'll play around with some stuff, and we'll see how this works. And if you have any questions, please, feel free to jump in the comments there. I'm a little rusty with my my T-SQL, so hopefully, we might have to look a bunch of things up, but that's fine. Okay, so let's jump over to Visual Studio Code here. I'm going to open a terminal window, and I'm just going to CD into a sandbox. Actually, I want to CD into git/sandbox like this. And then let's make a new directory. We'll call this, how about SQL Postgres API. How about that? Okay, CD into Postgres API. All right, so now we're in this particular directory. I'm just going to run code here to open this up. So that we're now in the main section here. And then I will just go ahead and run Ampt. So again, you install the Ampt CLI. It is just, npm I at ampt/CLI-G for a global install. We'll do this into the demo org here. And all right, so then we have to select what kind of app, this is just your boilerplate, what kind of template we're using. It's just nice because it'll sort of configure some things for you. I'm just going to use Hono. Again, I could do this in Express. I was actually prepping for this, and I did a couple of things in Express, and I've been working with Hono so much lately that it hurts to go back to Express. So if you are an Express person, yes, you can use Express. There's nothing wrong with Express. Just try Hono. It's so nice. But anyways, okay, we're gonna name this. My rant is over. So let's name this Postgres API. And then would we like to create it in the current directory? Yes, because we already have an empty directory here. So this will go ahead and install those dependencies for you. Sync any of those, sync the information from your local machine into a completely isolated developer sandbox for you. So you are actually, like right now, it's spinning up a a completely separate AWS account that is dedicated just to this app, to me as a developer. So this has gone ahead and created this this separate sandbox just for me. Now it gave me a URL. This URL again is unique to me. It's isolated to me. Before we click on that though, let's just go quickly and look and see what we actually are doing here. So start with the package.json file. This is helpful just because it gives us some information about how things are sort of routed and so forth. You can always see where the entry point is to your app by looking at the main entry here. So this is pointing to index.ts for us. This is just calling it a starter template. Let's go ahead and call this Postgres API demo. How about that? And we'll save that, okay? And then you'll see that you've got a start and then a git pod, Ampt. This is all of our templates are compatible. Well, Ampt is compatible with git pod and with code spaces, but we just give you some of these nice little things in there so that you don't have to configure these things manually if you do want to use one of those online IDEs, which are pretty cool, by the way. And I really do like Gitpod. Codespaces is good too, but Gitpod is pretty cool. And then we've got the dependencies installed, so just the Ampt SDK and then Hono. And then you see this little Ampt section down here, which tells us the name of our app and the org. And so this is just when you check this into, GitHub or into some sort of code repository, when other team members want to work on this. This is what tells them this is the app in the system that and the org that it's related to. So anyway, so this is telling us really here that index.ts is where we want to look. So if we jump into index.ts, we'll see that we're importing Hono. We create a new Hono app. This is just like Express, again, for your Express people. And then we've got an app.get for on route on /hello that just spits back some text. We've got this greet one. We've got this submit one here that this probably doesn't work, but that's all right. That essentially reads in the data for us. So now that we know that, and then the other thing as well is there's a static folder. Anything in the static folder will automatically be deployed as a static asset into your environment. So you can use this to do server-side static site rendering or static site generation. You can store, images and all kinds of other things that you can put in here. And then what's really cool about this is the way that Ampt works. One of the patterns that we implement automatically for you is that all of those static assets are moved into a CDN. They're all moved into an S3 bucket, then are then routed into the CDN, and then we use a manifest file to know what files are dynamic and what files are static and so forth. So it's pretty cool. It just takes care of all that for you. Just another thing you don't have to worry about. And that way you can mix dynamic and static routes, so you don't have to have like a /API in order to read static routes. And so that way you can do some things that are statically or that are dynamically generated by the server. Most of it runs on Lambda functions depending on the velocity and depending on what you're using for the back end. But essentially, that's just a nice feature to kind of have it mix and match those. So anyway, so if we go to this main URL here, and I do this, open up, this will go ahead and load that static page. Oh, actually, why is that not loading that static page? It's saying that I'm not connected to my sandbox. Should be. How about that? All right, let me run Ampt again and just connect. This here, refresh. Huh. Well, that's weird. Try that one more time. And also this, just to check. Let's see. Saying it's offline. Okay, well, that is something you don't see every day. Let me try... Well, that is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. So, all right, let's try something. Huh. I know it's probably because I have so many things running. I'm probably connected somewhere else that it doesn't like. I don't know. Let's just double check something over here. Okay, so that's running. So what am I doing over here that's not working? All right, well, I don't know why that's doing that, but I'm going to try something here. I'm going to go, oh, now it. Okay, I don't know. It might be because I have so many different things open and I'm switching between demo accounts and stuff like that. I haven't seen that happen. So anyways, all right, so this is that static page. We'll get back to that now. So here's the static page that we are loading. And again, the way that Ampt works, make this a little bit smaller so we can see this. The way Ampt works is that if you make a change to any of this text here, so this, for example, if I just say hello from Ampt, as soon as I save this, you'll see this little this little lightning bolt down here. This will just do a quick little sync for us, and then over on, didn't mean to click on that, over here, this will change immediately. So you have that instantaneous sync, which allows you to work very quickly within your developer sandboxes. So no idea why it didn't work that first time. That was really weird. Okay, so anyway, so we have this hello world now. So this is just loading that static index page because it's at index.html. But what we actually want to do is we want to look at index.ts because this is where we're actually running some dynamic routes. So if we change this now to /hello, we'll now get this hello here. And then the other option was, I guess I could make this a little bit bigger. And then the other route that was here was this greet/name. So if we change this to greet and we say Ampt like this, then this will say hello Ampt like that. And then again, you can make changes to your front end, to your back end, all this kind of stuff. It's all synced together and it all happens instantaneously. So if I wanted to change this to say output instead of message, I save this, I jump over here, I refresh, and I will immediately have this say output instead. My voice is very, very, you sound like a late night DJ today, playing the smooth hits from the 80s and 90s. Okay, so anyways, so that's setting up the project, right? We got that taken care of. So now the other thing that we want to do, though, is we want to introduce SQL into this. We want to introduce Postgres into this. So I can just come over here, and actually we'll jump over to the docs so that we can see what this actually says. So over in the docs, essentially says we just have to npm install SQL here, or the Ampt SQL. So I'll go ahead and do that. That will install, and you'll see this thing that says runtime config updated. So what this is doing is, as soon as it sees that you are trying to use SQL, it's going to say, oh, okay, we need to make sure that we configure a SQL database for you. So now what that's just done is actually just provisioned a SQL or a Postgres database for us behind the scenes. And it's done all the mapping and everything for us. So if I go over to here and I go into, this is the dashboard, and I go into this SQL tab there, there's no tables found yet because we haven't created any tables, but it is still, it is there. So, all right, so let's go back to our docs. It says the next step after we install ampt/SQL is we want to import it. So let's go ahead and import this into our app. We'll do this right up top here, import SQL from ampt/SQL. And then it says the next thing that we want to do is we can use the SQL interface. So the SQL interface that we expose is just this, I'll show you here. Let's open another tab and go over to Neon Tech. So Neon has a, it's under here, their Neon serverless driver. And essentially what this is it connects over HTTP, so you don't have to maintain that connection. And what's nice about that is that it is, you don't have to worry about, if you're familiar with, which again, it's one of those things that's somewhat frustrating or very frustrating, I would say, about using Lambda functions, is because Lambda functions behind the scenes are single concurrency or have single concurrency. That means that every one request actually has its own separate container. Those containers get reused. So if you make a bunch of SQL connections with those, with each container, you can reuse that. You can reuse that Postgres container if you use a traditional, reuse that Postgres connection if you use a traditional Postgres connection. The problem is that if you spin up 3,000 Lambda functions in order to handle a bunch of requests, then your Postgres database has to handle those 3,000 open connections, which they don't necessarily do very well. It creates just a bunch of CPU usage. This is one of the problems with even serverless or Aurora serverless directly on AWS. That's why they created RDS proxy. It's a whole thing. Anyways, using the HTTP interface is just a much easier way to do it, and then you don't have to worry about holding on to those connections. And those connections are reused from the HTTP. I believe the persistent connection is kept open, or the what do they call it? HTTP, whatever it is. But essentially, it keeps that connection open, that HTTP connection open, so that it doesn't have to reestablish, doesn't have to do that handshake every time. So in between invocations, it is reusable. Anyway, so so we don't have to install this. This is essentially what you did with the Ampt SQL. So you don't have to do this, and you don't have to do this, right? You don't have to go ahead and grab that database URL. As we saw over here, there's a way that you can grab this connection string. We don't need that. That's already done for us, so it's just taken care of. And then it just tells you about sort of how to use the driver. So if you're using it in Node, then you essentially the way that they want you to bring it in is you bring in Neon, and then you run Neon, and you use the database URL, and then you can have this thing called SQL. But what's great about this is you get this. You just get SQL back, right? And everything else is done for you. The database URL and the connection management, that's all done for you. So essentially now you have the SQL option here, which is very cool because you can use it just like this, or you can either wrap it like that if you want to, or you can actually just do it inline like this, which is pretty cool. And that's it. And that's all done for you. So we have that now. So in our system here now, or in our code, we actually have this SQL thing that we can actually use. All right. We don't have any tables or anything like that yet, so that is something that we're going to have to do. So if we go back over to the docs, there's a couple different things that we can do. So this Kaisali, I don't even know how to pronounce it, but Kaisali or Kaisali, I guess. Kisali. Somebody can probably tell me how to pronounce it. Anyways, this is an ORM that we have sort of incorporated into it more so for the migration side of things, right? There's other ways you can do migrations, and you could write these migration scripts yourself and do some of that stuff. But this package here just really handles the migration stuff pretty well. I'm not a big fan of ORMs or ORMs. To do things like this, like insert into post, values, returning all, execute, take first, this is all fine. I've never found there to be a huge value in ORMs. If you do, then great. There's no reason why you can't use them. Some of this stuff is sort of nice. I just always find them to sort of obscure what it is that you're trying to do. I like to see the raw SQL and be able to actually manipulate that SQL myself so that I can make sure that it's optimized correctly. But to each his own. Anyways, so you can use that if you want to use that interface to build, as the ORM to do that. But really, what I'm more interested in is just using it for the migration. So this is one of those things that gets really, really tough. If you've ever built, a Postgres or MySQL database and used it in production, it's like, okay, well, we need to add a new field. All right, great. So we add a new field. So where do you add that new field? Do you log in and change the field, add the field somewhere in a database? Okay, well, that's great if you have one master database maybe, but then you don't really have a record that you change that in a way. And so having an ability or having the ability to keep track of these migrations over time is really, really good, and it just sort of saves all that stuff for you, and then you can rebuild the database and make all the migrations and make all those changes and so forth, so that the state is the same, especially when you're deploying it to multiple environments. And since the way that Ampt works is that it's going to create a new database for you that is isolated to each environment, that's going to do that automatically for you. So having the ability to make sure that it's in the right state and it has all the right the right migrations done is super important. So anyways, so Keisley or Caselli, whatever it is, Keisley, has this this really cool concept of migrations, where essentially what you can do is you can just write these scripts and put them into a migrations folder. And then what we did is we added this ampt-SQL CLI command that will run these migrate commands within the Ampt context for you. And again, the reason why that is great, because then it actually has access, has all the permissions it needs and so forth, and it can do some pretty cool things. Let's just show it. It'll be a little bit easier. All right, so I'm going to copy this code here. And I'm going to go back into my code over here. I'm going to create a new folder that I'm going to call migrations, like this. And in here, so the way that these files work is that, the way migrations work is they run them in alphabetical order. So you can name these things anything you want, like 00001 dash migrations. Some people recommend using a date. You can do that too. All right, so if we wanted to say, what's today's date? Today is 2024-04-11, and let's say it's 27 a.m. 27, so it's 11, we'll have to do military time, right? And then just make this the .js file, and then we can go ahead and paste in what we want to do here. So this is going to create a post with an ID column that has, that's serial ID, or it's a serial number. It's identified as the primary key, and then it adds a column called content with text saying that it can't be null, and then it executes that. And then there's the down. So there's two, you have to export two. One is an up function and the other is the down function. So when you execute the up function, that's basically saying, okay, I need to, run this command whenever I'm, upgrading the database, and then I need to run this command when I'm downgrading the database. So essentially, you never want to run the down ones usually in a production database. You always kind of want to move up. So it's just sort of good to have. It's just good to sort of have these for when you're working in a developer environment, to be able to make some changes and then say, oh, I want to roll these changes back and so forth. So, anyways, that's database management. That's a little bit outside of the scope of what we're talking about, but it's built in here. It's just a nice way to kind of have these features and be able to do them. So anyway, so we're going to create this. So I'm going to save this here. And now what we can do is, now that we've saved this, the only other thing we have to make sure we have is we need to have these scripts installed. Not really installed, but just configured, right? So we go over to our package.json file. We've got the script section here. I'm just going to remove the one there for Gitpod, because we're not going to be using that. Oops, down. Okay, so now I just added this amp migrate up, amp migrate down, right? So now I have this all set. So I'm going to save this. And the last thing I think I have to do is then I can just run migrate. I might have to install. Did I install? Oh, I think I have to install this first, though. Yes, I do have to install Kisley here, whatever it's called. Let's run install here. So this has installed the package for me. I'll hit clear, and then I can go ahead and run, as this says over here. I can run migrate, right? So now just run migrate like this, and this will migrate to the latest, and it says this was successfully executed. So now if we go into our console here and into SQL, we will now have these migration tables, a migration lock, and then we also have this posts table that has content and ID or post relation, or I don't know, whatever you call them in Postgres now. So we now have this. Now there's no data in here. We'll do that in a second. And then the other thing I just want to show is that if you did want to add, well, I can maybe show you this. So now if we were to run migrate down here, for example, this will go ahead and run the last migration, and it will revert that one there. And essentially what that will have done, so if we come over here, hopefully we won't get us something went wrong. But essentially now that post table is gone. Okay, so let's go ahead and run migrate again. And this will go back, and this should update it now. So now we should have our post directory just like that, which is great. And then let's create another migration here. So let's copy this, and we'll paste it. And then we're going to change this. Oops, we're going to change this one here. See it? This one. This is going to be our new one that we're going to run at 31, like this. And again, I'm not a big fan of the date thing. I mean, it might be nice to have the date thing in there simply because you know the day that it was kind of configured. But you also see that in your Git repositories and some of that other stuff. So it all depends on how you want to manage it. Anyway, so I want to add another field here. So we have this, and again, this is all. I will tell you this: I am not a huge fan of the. I don't even spell this name right. Did I mean that? Yes, I meant this. I'm not a huge fan of the documentation here. It is a little bit sort of confusing. So these examples are sort of helpful to get you pointed in the right direction, like add column and so forth. You're probably better off using ChatGPT to answer some of these questions for you. If you were to search for like add column here, there's like this create table builder. It's not really specified super well in terms of like how some of that works. But so you kind of got to figure out where some of this stuff is. I mean, maybe there's a better way to search this documentation, but this seems to be like auto-generated and not very well put together. But what we want is the alter column builder here. And then in here, I think this is not alter column. We want alter table builder, sorry. This one here. And then there's an add column here. And then there's an example, I think, of add column. Let's see here. So now you have alter table person, add index column. So there's just different ways. Again, this is Kisley or whatever in terms of how this stuff works. But essentially what we want to do here is this is our updated one. So we want to do an alter table here. And we want to alter table posts. And we want to add a column. And we'll just call this column, I'll just call it name, like this. And we just want this to be a text field, and then we don't want anything special. So this can be null if it needs to be. And then the thing we want to do here is schema, and then I believe, just double check here. We want a drop column, right? So we would do drop column here. There's just, I don't know. This doesn't look, I don't like this type of documentation. Anyway, so we want a DB schema, and we don't want to drop table. We want to alter table like this, and we want to alter table posts, and we want to drop column name like this. Okay, so this should work. So now if we were to run Ampt migrate again, this should migrate us to the latest. It says that this was executed successfully. And if we went into the backend here, click into this, we now have our name column. And then again, if we wanted to run migrate down, this should revert that change, which means that our name column should be gone. So we'll run migrate again. So anyways, this is like a nice way to sort of manage that. It's all codified for you. You can check it into your GitHub and have a record of all that stuff. Now again, it does keep track of all those migrations in this migration table here. just in terms of, I think when they ran and so forth, but it's just nice to have that other stuff in place for you. So anyways, it's pretty simple. I say simple, actually, it's not. It's extremely complex to manage schemas and databases, but if you're doing something relatively straightforward, it's not too bad. Okay, so anyway, so we now have a table. We now have some fields in that table that we can use, or some columns in the table that we can use. So let's go ahead and actually do something with it. So first thing we want to do is let's actually post some data to it. So we have this submit that was already created for us, just this post thing here. And then let's go over to Postman here. Oops, I'll just create a new thing here. And then we want to make sure we have our URL. You can always get your URL by typing in URL like this. So copy this. And this endpoint is going to be /submit, I think is what we called it. Yeah, /submit. And this is going to be a post request. And we're going to send in some body. We'll just send in some raw JSON here. And this will be name. Oops, name will be my first post, and content, spelled correctly, will be, this is some test content. There we go. Okay, exclamation point, save. Oops, I don't want to save that because we are going to post this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit send. So this will send this up, and this will give us my first post. This is some test content. So this rec JSON, yeah, so it's parsing the JSON there. Right, it's actually exactly what we wanted to do. Okay, so this is parsing the JSON for us. It's giving us exactly what we need in order to now insert something into the database. So again, use something like Zod and make sure that you're validating this and everything is working correctly. So you're not just taking user input and inserting it into a database, but we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to just go ahead and do that insert instead. All right, so we're going to say if data exists here, which again, we don't even necessarily need to do that. Let's just go ahead and insert it. So we'll say const, and we'll say res equals. And then what we want to do is await SQL. And we're going to insert into posts like this. And we're going to insert the name and the content. And then the values are going to be data.name. And data.content, like that, and do that. Okay, and then what's cool about this is that this, when we use a template literal like this with SQL, this will automatically, this will escape everything in here, so you don't have to worry about SQL injection. If you, it's one of those things that we don't really think about anymore with NoSQL, I guess. But with regular SQL, with Postgres, you do need to worry about SQL injection, right? So if somebody wanted to change something here and put drop table, whatever, or expose it somehow, they could do that. And then the other thing I want to add, so anyway, so you don't have to worry about that with this. And then I'll just do returning star so that we get all the information back. And then I'll do body data, but then I'll do, well, yeah. How about this? It's just suggesting it for me. So DB res. All right. So let's clear this. Now, one of the things too is just when you're working with this SQL interface here, this is just exposing the Postgres or the Neon serverless driver or serverless interface. But essentially, if it does error out, it's going to just crash everything. So always a good idea to wrap these things in a try catch. So I'm just going to go ahead and do catch an error like this. Nope, that's not what I want. Error. And then we will return message and error 500. Sure, great. That should be good. Okay, so now we should be able to submit this over here. And let me do send. And it says that we have, I don't know if I can make that any smaller. Sorry, here we go. So this is saying that we have my first post, and this is some test content, and then it actually did insert into the database content. This is some test content and name my first post. Okay, so that's the first part of it. Now if we want to submit a second one, just to have more data in there, my second post, and this is some more test content. We'll submit this. And now we'll get ID number 2, and that information is there. And now what we have as part of this interface here, if we go into SQL and we go into posts, we'll see that these two posts here are listed. You can also run queries. So if you did want to do something like select star from posts where ID equals 2, and then run that there, you'll get those queries there. And you can insert data here and do all kinds of things just for sort of a quick interface for you to kind of play around with that. And it does keep a history of what your queries were. So again, this is in beta. So the idea here is to get feedback and see sort of how people are playing around with it, what we're missing, what you'd like to see, and so forth. But it's still got some pretty nice features here. Okay, so anyway, so now we've done that. So let's go ahead and jump back to our code quickly, and then just spit back some data. So in this hello one here, rather than spitting back just hello, let's do const, and we'll call this data, and we'll say, let's see, await. SQL select star from posts. Oops, actually was doing what I wanted to do. Select star from posts. It needs to be async like this. Okay, and then instead of returning the text there, let's just do return c.json, and we'll return the data like that, and click save. And then when we come back over to our thing here, and we load hello like this, we should see our data coming back now. Okay, so how you manipulate this data and so forth, that is all, again, it's just standard Postgres, so you can insert, update, do all that stuff, right? Use the interface to do some of those other things. But I want to show you just sort of how some of these other things work in terms of sort of like having data across multiple environments, right? So what time we got? Okay, we got a little bit of time. So if I was to go back here and I said, all right, I'm happy with the way that this thing works now, I can insert data. Actually, one thing I should show just quickly, because this is actually pretty cool, is if we didn't want to insert it, so if we don't await it and we just do this interface like this, then when we actually send the request in, so I'll say my third post like this, and then I'll click send. This will come back and show me the parameterized query. So this is what that interface does automatically for us, is it automatically basically creates this parameterization for us, and parameterizes the input, right? So now, this, if I come back over here and refresh, it didn't await that, so this didn't actually execute, right? So that didn't insert. So we can go ahead and just basically get back the parameterized query, and then we can execute that later if we wanted to, which is just sort of nice. And this also you can see how it's parsing the queries and how it's doing some of that stuff for you, which is a nice little feature. So anyway, so if we go back to await this, save that, go back to my Postman and submit this again. Now this time it will actually submit it, right? And we'll have that data here. Okay, so anyways, if I wanted to take this, I'm happy with the way that this works. I like what it's doing. I want to go ahead and move this into production or into a production account. So now if I was to go and type in deploy, and of course CI/CD is all set up here as well. So if you wanted to you want to automate this with CI/CD, it's like 2 clicks in the dashboard and it's all set for you. But I'm going to go ahead and run deploy prod. Do you want to deploy it to prod? Yes, I do. All right, so this should go ahead now and run a deployment to a new stage for us, which is a completely isolated AWS account, right? And this is completely independent of anything else that I'm running. So this is the new prod account that's being created right now. It's in the process of being deployed. But what we should see from this, and again, this is in beta, so So bear with me for a second. Here we go. Okay, so now we have this posts table that got created on this new instance for me. So this post table has no content in it because it's completely different. It's completely isolated, compared to, or isolated from this version of it, which is on my which is in my developer sandbox. Okay, so now I have in this prod environment here, I actually have a completely fresh environment. So I can go ahead and take this URL, actually just pop this open. And if I was to go to /hello, like this, I should get absolutely no data back because no data exists. But if I was to take this and let's pop over into Postman here, and I'll do submit like this, and then I'm going to submit this. I'm going to say it's the third post, whatever, but I send this here, and this is now submitted the third post, even though it's the only post there. But if I refresh this here, I'll get this is some more. This is more test content from my third post. Okay, so those are two separate environments. It's the same app, right? And now if I make changes to this, for example, I submitted third post. Notice this is ID 1. This has not in any way affected this here, which is my developer sandbox. All right. So one other thing that I just want to show. I guess I'll show you this too. So if I wanted to, and I want to just type in share. So this is one of the things that we've been experimenting with, trying to see if we could get if we could be using branching to do some of this. It doesn't quite work the way that we were hoping it was going to work, but we're still experimenting. So the goal here was to basically say that if you were to spin up a preview environment, it would use the same data from your developer sandbox. If you spun it up this way. Let's see if it works. I don't remember if we may have taken that out. But anyway, so this is deploying now. So this will give us a new, if we come over here and go to this, we now have this new one here. And I think if we go in here, post, yeah. So this is just created a new, this just created another, sort of new unique environment for us. So it's not using branching just yet. Again, we had some reasons why we couldn't quite do that, but we do have this. So this is another thing though. So these are ephemeral environments, right? So I've got this here, and /hello is going to have no data here, and then if I wanted to submit data to it, I could. But again, what's really great about just environments too, the way that it works with Ampt is these are 3 separate AWS accounts. They're all completely isolated. Each one's backed by a separate database, powered by Neon. If I go in here, I can delete this environment too. You can just throw these things away, like it's gone, and that environment's gone now. The data's gone. Everything's cleaned up behind the scenes for me. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to spin down resources. It's just done. So anyways, it's nice. Just another nice thing that you can do. So anyways, all right. So one last thing I want to show before we wrap up some of this stuff is I want to look at the idea of sort of seeding data and how we can do some of that. So. If we wanted to seed data into our local, our local system, we could easily just write a script here, or into our local developer sandbox, or into the developer sandbox that we're using. We could just go ahead and write some SQL, and we could execute it here, and that would be fine. So one of the things that Ampt has, though, that is very powerful, are the idea of scripts. So let's say that I wanted to write a script. I'll call this c.js. I can import into here. I'll import that SQL interface like so, not from that, but from Ampt/SQL like that. And then now what I have the ability to do is I can actually write queries against this that are running from my local machine, but they'll run in the Ampt context as long as I run these scripts using the Ampt CLI. So let's go ahead and run. We'll call this seed for now, but essentially what I want to do is I just want to await, and I'm going to do SQL like this and select star from posts like this. Okay. And that, not where ID equals 1. It's the frustrating thing about, I know some people have been talking about this lately, but Copilot has been frustrating me when you hit tab and you you don't want you're hitting tab for a different reason or whatever, and it ends up bringing all that stuff in. Anyways, all right. Sometimes it's really, really great and I do love it, and then other times it drives me nuts. So essentially here, though, what I'm doing is I'm just selecting star from posts, and it is going to spit this out. It's going to log it back to the console for me. So now all I have to do is type in run seed.js, and this will go ahead and this will run on my local. On the local sandbox that I'm using it's not local, but the remote sandbox, but it's my dev sandbox, the one that we were experimenting with first. It'll run this here. Now, the other thing that I can do, which is pretty cool, is then I can also run this, but do env and type in that prod, and then I can run this against prod, and that's just going to give me whatever I have in prod. So this is a really cool way that if you do need to sort of seed stuff. Now, part of what you can do in the migration script here is you can actually insert data here as well. So like if you had some enums or some basic data that needed to be in every single environment, you could do that as a migration script, and that would automatically do that data for you. But let's say that you're trying to manipulate some data in a remote database and you want to do that all with some scripting. You can write those scripts. You could deploy those scripts as part of the application itself. You can maybe give yourself an interface in order to trigger those scripts and things like that in order to do that. But if you just want to do something sort of quick and dirty in order to do some migrations or things like that, you can just run that. You can just run that locally. So if we did want to insert something new in here, maybe we wanted to say. So I'll comment this out here, and let's just say we do const seed. We'll wait and we'll insert into posts, and we want to insert content and name, and again we can do this. If we want this to be content and name. And I know you can do bulk inserts and you can do unnest and some other things like that if you wanted to do those. But if I just set const content and const name, and I'll call this a new post from a script like this. All right, so now if I run this here, if I just run this script like this, then this should go ahead and insert it. You'll see that it's ID 4, that it's inserting there. And again, I could come over to this one and refresh, and we should see ID 4 down here. This content is still untouched, right? It's just that one there. And if I wanted to insert that into that database, then again, I just do env prod. That'll insert that there, refresh that, and now I have that in my prod table. So anyways, so there's just a lot of really, easy ways to interact with data. You could write more complex scripting that would do some of this stuff. You can also write these scripts as something that would run based off of a more standard command, so you wouldn't have to necessarily write you wouldn't have to type in run seed.js or whatever that was. So if you wanted to come into your package.json here, and we wanted to add another one where we said ampt : seed, and then you could just run. You would just run, let's see, node seed.js like this. You could do something like this, and then you should just be able to type in run seed like that, and then that'll go ahead and execute that and just generate another thing for you. And of course, you can pass in env prod here like this, and then that would give you, the different environment to interact with. So anyways, all right, so that's Ampt SQL. I think that, again, there's a lot of things that you can do here. Obviously, you can, write full APIs around this. You should be sanitizing your data with Zod, like I mentioned earlier. But it's pretty powerful. I guess one last thing we could sort of talk about is, what do you do when you go to production? So is Neon ready for production, like for really, really large use cases? One of the reasons why we love Neon is because of the way that sort of the multi-tenancy works with them, where you can spin up a Postgres database without having to spin up an RDS cluster behind the scenes. And because the way, sort of the philosophy of Ampt is, we want everything to run in the cloud. We want you to have as high fidelity environments as possible possible. So whatever your developer sandbox is doing, whatever your preview environments are doing, whatever your staging and other environments are doing, we want those to basically be as close, if not exactly the same as your production environment, because we want you to not have any surprise production bugs because you were running it locally with some local emulation or something like that, and it didn't quite line up when you got to the when you got it into production. So we try to make sure that those are the same. So that's what's nice about Neon, is that it allows us to create a database for every single environment and have those be isolated. So if you were if you wanted to set up your own maybe RDS cluster, or maybe you wanted to use Aurora Serverless or something like that, you certainly could, and that's something you can use from Ampt. But what we're trying to figure out is, can you use that in production, and then use these in your developer environments, right? Are you getting a similar fidelity between the two, so that you could really manage your production database at scale, but then your your developer databases and things like that, they're free, they're ephemeral, they spin up and down very quickly, and it's not costing you. You don't have to set up separate RDS clusters or worry about cross accounts and some of that stuff. So that's some of the stuff we're trying to figure out. Would love to get feedback on that and sort of make SQL just a standard part, or Postgres and MySQL a standard part of building apps using Ampt. But one of the things that you can do is, if you are, if you do want to use Neon as your provider, we can manage all of those accounts for you within your development, your development phase, are all the different developer sandboxes and the preview accounts. But if you did want to do, if you wanted to have your own account for production, and you wanted that to sort of be managed separately outside of Ampt, you can do that. So the way that this essentially works is, you just need to return SQL as with the URL like this. So if you wanted to, that's interesting, flipping out on me. Anyway, so if you wanted to override this URL, I don't think we give you a standard way to necessarily do it right now, but all you have to do is essentially, I would copy something like this, for example, or I would maybe copy this whole thing, and then what I can do is in my file here, I would import Neon like that, and then I would say something like, let's see, I'd say if params ampt env equals prod like this. Then I would set SQL like this, and then I would probably do, this would be params database URL like this, and then we would have to bring in import params from Ampt SDK like that. Okay, and this is an install, that's why it's telling us that. But essentially, why is this angry at me? Boolean is not a sign of a primitive type string. Oh, yes. Try that again. Okay, like that. All right, that would work. And then this is saying SQL, because it would be a constant, right? So we would have to bring this in as something like this, or the other way around. One of these ways. It's just saying it's not used yet. Never used, right? So then we could do let SQL equals SQL 2, like that, and then maybe it's the other way around. JavaScript 2, something like that. There's a way that you can do that. And maybe it's as. Oh, maybe that's what it is. Maybe I'm just thinking, yeah, I think it's as. Okay. Right. So then this way you could override it in the production environment. You want to override the URL. It's probably a better way for us to do this. We could probably implement a better way to do it. But anyways, all right. Well, I'm going to remove this because this is going to cause problems. And I'll change this like that. Anyways, hopefully the point is there. So the goal here is just to make it drop dead simple to use SQL or Postgres in your Ampt apps, or the apps that you build with Ampt. Now, again, this is all being deployed to AWS, right? So, if you want to deploy to your own AWS account, let us know. We can do that. We can host all of the developer and preview environments, and then just put your production apps on your own AWS account. So we're trying to experiment with a number of different ways to do this kind of stuff. But we still love RDS, or we still love RDS. Yeah, we still love RDBMS and Postgres and MySQL and things like that. So if you're interested in playing around with it, go ahead, sign up, play around, let us know what you think, tell us what we're missing, and yeah. So give Amp a try. Sign up. It's free to sign up right now to get a preview account. You can come in here and you can get a bunch of stuff with built-in CI/CD, all kinds of stuff that you can do, deploy a couple of test apps, and play around with that stuff. So anyways, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or to anybody at Ampt, and follow us on socials and things like that.